It was also the first time that we used whistleblowers in an anonymous capacity in a large number. Mostly De Beers workers and union members who prepared to talk to us off the record and with a broken glass in front of them so you couldn't see who they were. But we then discovered that the company went after them and tried to identify them all. And they used police methods and secret recordings to find out who they were. So it was the first major experience we had with surveillance and spying by big companies and governments. Because at that time, the South African and British governments worked together with De Beers against journalists at that time.
Tämä oli ensimmäisiä kertoja, jolloin käyttivät tiedonvuottajia, ilmiantajia, muita, olkoon ammattiliikkeen jäseniä tai De Beersin työntekijöitä, jotka näyttäytyivät muun muassa naamakasvata peitettynä haastateltaviksi. Ja tämä oli myös ensimmäinen kerta, kun he todella tulivat tekemisiin kirjaimellisesti vakoilun ja valvonnan kanssa, koska niin Britannian kuin Etelä-Afrikankin hallitus teki yhteistyötä De Beersin kanssa näihin aikoihin, yrittää saada selville, ketkä nämä ilmiantajat olivat, yrittää käyttää poliisitutkimuksia heitä vastaan.
We were told at that time that De Beers Anglo-American employed private detectives in London to spy against us and our colleagues. And so we decided to use that method against them. And so we began talking on the telephone openly about our information and the quality of information we had, most of which were lies, but we told them that we had a lot of information, particularly about their labor history, some of which was true, about what they actually did to people, and we were going to publicize that. And we made up some numbers, 25,000 people arrested, etc. And they were listening to this, of course, on the phone, the detectives, and they dropped the suit literally 1 week later.
Kun sait varoituksen, että Englannissa yksityisetsiviä oli heidän jäljillään, he päättivät vaihtaa taktiikkaansa ja alkoivat puhelimessa puhua avoimesti tutkimuksistaan ja löytöistään. Ja joskus se, mitä he sanoivat, oli jopa totta. Mutta kun yhdistää nämä valheet, puhumattakaan niistä todellisista epäkohdista, joita he ovat saaneet, ennen kaikkea siinä, miten De Beers kohteli työntekijöitään. Kun nämä salakuuntelijat oli viikon viettäneet tätä, niin kas kummaa, syytteet tiputetaan.
But what this led us to understand was that new journalists did not have these methods often at their disposal. So we thought that we should go back, as the television situation had deteriorated a great deal by that point. This was 10 years of Thatcher. So now the journalism was frightened. People were frightened to say anything. Everybody was a careerist. I'm only looking to pay my mortgage, which was the standard refrain.
Tämä kuitenkin osoitti, että, anteeksi aloitetaan uudestaan, että vaikka he vanhan polven edustajat olivat oppineet nämä temput, samaa ei voinut sanoa uudemmista journalisteista, jotka olivat tottuneet jo 10 vuotta kestäneeseen Thatcherin aikaiseen hyssyttely- ja painostukseen. Useimmat heistä olivat uraihmisiä ja keskittyivät ennemmin huolestumaan siitä, miten he maksavat asuntolainansa, kuin miten saada totuus julki.
So we decided the best thing to do was to train young journalists, and we set up this organization we now run called the Center for Investigative Journalism. And we did it in my living room and a colleague's living room. And we invited people to come and for 1 hour, but 5 hours they were still there arguing. And that became eventually a kind of school. And we raised some money, and then finally a university asked us if we would come and teach their students, which we did. And that was the beginning of CIJ.
Ja Center for Investigative Journalism alkoi kirjaimellisesti herra MacFadyen ja hänen kollegonsa olohuoneessa. He olivat päättäneet opettaa uusia journalisteja, kouluttaa heitä mihin varautua. Ja vaikka alkuun tarkoitus oli vain pitää epävirallisia, noin tunnin mittaisia tapaamisia, kohta huomattiin, että tämä paisuu 5 tuntia, vaikka siltikin paukuttaa ovella pyytäen päästä osallistumaan. Lopulta tämä johti siihen, että yliopisto, jota ei mainittu, pyysi heitä opettamaan oppilaitaan, ja tässä oli keskuksen alku.
I mean, this coincided with a period of increasing conservatism in the newsprint, in broadsheets, and also in television and radio, where it was now very difficult. This is in the late 90s, early 2000s and so. It was very difficult to make controversial programs, very difficult to make conflict programs of that kind. War reporting simply stopped. The investigation into companies stopped. There hasn't been an investigation in British television of a company for almost 11 years. And since 80% of the crimes in a society are committed by companies, that tells you what is actually involved in the decision not to allow us to do it.
Tämä tapahtui samoihin aikoihin, kun niin sanomalehdissä kuin televisiossa konservatismi alkoi olla yhä vahvemmin vallalla. Yhtiörikoksia ei enää tutkittu, sotaraportointi tyrehtyi täysin. Herra MacFadyenin arvion mukaan 80% rikoksista tapahtuu yhtiöiden aiheuttamana, joten tämä kertoo jotain siitä, mistä on kyse ja missä tällä hetkellä mennään.
The result was we ended up training about 1,000 journalists and a very large number from the third world, mostly Africans and Indians and Latin Americans. The Latin Americans always went without names at that period because it was still the period of the Central American Wars and nobody wanted to be known to have been in the school. Subsequently, we have an office of our group called A Publica in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have people working with Korean investigators against corporate crime and fraud in Korea. And we're training a lot of people in Lithuania, in Latvia, Azerbaijan, though again there is very anonymous. But we train people without knowing who they are, but they just come mysteriously and we have sessions and then they go away. But the effect though is to keep the training alive. And that's largely, am I going too fast? Good. It's largely data. We train people in data analysis, what we call scraping data, which is to find data on the internet and then find the stories in the numbers. And there's a phrase for that, it's called finding the blood in the numbers. And it's usually about corporate crime, about violence and justice issues. For example, you get this police statistics and you learn an enormous amount about stuff that is really incredibly shocking. And we publicize that.
Hän alkuun mainitsi, että keskus on kouluttanut jo hyvinkin 1000 journalistia ennen kaikkea Afrikan, Latina-Amerikan maista ja myös Intiasta. Ja niin Latina- ja Keski-Amerikassa kuin esimerkiksi Liettuassa ja muualla Itä-Euroopassa nämä journalistit edelleenkin toimivat nimettöminä, koska alkuun 90-luvulla, 2000-luvun alulla oli edelleen Keski-Amerikan sotien aika, jolloin potentiaalinen vaara omalla hengelle oli varsin suuri. Ja myöhempinä vuosina he ennen kaikkea kouluttivat näitä journalisteja keskittymään löytämään numerot, tilastot, tilikirjat, eri yhtiöt, eri organisaatioilta ja yrittää kaivaa totuuden näistä. Tähän mainitsi scrape blood out of the numbers, eli raaputtaa veri esiin numeroista.
Those methods are hard to get now, but some universities are now teaching them. But the biggest thing we discovered came from our interest in whistleblowers. But they become very important to us. They are the main sources of information, and their courage is the basis of so much of our journalism. We get the credit for it, but they are the ones who take the personal risk to tell us. So we find it very important to find ways to protect them.
Vaikka muutama yliopisto edelleen opettaa tätä tiedon kaivamista esiin numeroiden, tilastojen ja tilien seasta, tärkeintä keskuksen työlle on ilmiantajat, visertävät tiedonvuotajat, koska vaikka keskus usein saa kiitokset siitä, kun jokin suuri skandaali nousee ilmoille, todellinen työ ja todellinen riski on aina näillä tiedonantajien harteilla.
The interest for us became very specific about 2006, and I was reading a magazine on a crazy subject about which I know nothing, which is digital technology.
2006 hän oli lukemassa sanomalehteä niinkin hänelle oudosta aiheesta kuin digitaaliteknologia.
And then I read a story about a crazy Australian with white hair who was interested in protecting whistleblowers.
Ja tarinassa hän ensimmäistä kertaa kuuli hullusta vaakatukkaisesta australialaisesta, joka oli päättänyt suojella tiedonantajia.
So I tried to reach him, this man, with the unusual name that he claimed was Japanese, called Julian Assange. And I found him in the end in Kenya, in a swamp in Kenya, where he was collecting information on corruption in the Kenyan government. And, and he was very suspicious of me because of my accent. Why do you want to talk to me? You're an American. You must be a CIA agent. All of it. But we became subsequently close friends. And anyway, sorry.
Yrittäessä tavoittaa tämän australialaisen, jonka nimi paljastui olevan Julian Assange, jonka herra itse väittää olla japanilainen. Herra MacFadyen lopulta löysi hänet suosta Keniassa, missä hän oli yrittämässä paljastaa Kenian hallituksen tekosia. Ja ensi tapaamisella herra Assangen asenne on, hetkonen, mikä tuo aksentti on? No, amerikkalainen, se täytyy olla se ja vakoja.
So then, curiously, some months later, I was in California having a debate on the politics of journalism, and there was a man with white hair at the end of the platform. That was Julian Assange, and so we renewed our friendship by that point, and then when he came to London, he spent a lot of time with us, and he recruited most of his staff from our people in the office of the Center for Investigative Journalism.
Seuraava tapaamisensa oli Kaliforniassa väittelyssä, jossa tavattuaan yksi asia johtaa toiseen, kunnes lopulta Julian Assange on Lontoossa ja vuosien mittaan päätyy värväämään suurin osan työntekijöistään tyydyn sanomaan keskukseen.
But we then established a long relationship with the process of finding secure ways in which people could give us information that we could publish as journalists. So our relationship to Assange changed everything we did, because he made us aware, which we were not before, of the importance of using computers in a new way, in a very secure and safe way, using encryption and Tor and the other methods that keep journalists safe. And we find now that this is the main thing we teach, particularly for foreign journalists in dangerous places.
Assangen nostettua kuvioihin tärkeimmäksi keskuksen opetuksesta nousi tietoturvaa ja tietoteknologian käyttö, olkoon ne enkryptio, tiedon salaaminen tai muut vastaavat, koska nämä olivat avainasemassa, jotta journalistit ja tiedonvuotajat kautta maailman voisivat turvallisesti raportoida väärinteoista keskuksella.
I mean, in fact, we published a handbook recently, and we were always very pleased if 100 people, 200, 500 people read a handbook. This one has already sold 170,000 copies on information security.
Keskus hiljattain julkaisi käsikirjan, joka opetti ja käsitteli juuri näitä asioita, vaikka heidän oletuksensa oli, että no on hyvä, jos se 100 ihmistä lukee tämän. 70 000 kopiota on jo myyty.
So it's changed the way we think about transmitting information. It means that we haven't abandoned traditional methods, but that we open the door as much as we can to technical methods too, so that the state is not the only one with those methods. And we find that our allies in this endeavor are very young. I may be very old, but the hackers are very young. So they are in the age of between 17 and 21, and they're teaching our alcoholic 50-year-old journalists how to encrypt themselves. So, for example, one method that we learned from the kids was that we do crypto parties. I mean, what it is basically, for those who don't know what it is you organize a room like this, you invite 50 journalists or anybody else, and you have one person per table who knows something about computers, and usually they're very young. And so there's somebody on encryption, somebody on Tor, somebody on OTR, somebody on Mac computers, specialists, kids who are specialists in this, and they train the journalists. As a result now, we have hundreds of journalists who know how to protect themselves and their sources. We've had no sources arrested in Britain, I think this year, because of the encryption, because encryption does work. It's a very effective way, and there's not a single important metropolitan country in which the secret police don't use these methods intensely, much more so than the public realizes. So we have a big program now in London, but also now in Germany, in Berlin, to build an organization together with hackers, so that young hackers become allies and partners and brothers to what we do. And that's begun to work very well. Though most journalists were very suspicious at first to work with somebody so young. But then, in fact, now it's taking off and it's everywhere now. So even in America now, there are people who are doing this to protect themselves against the FBI.